Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, September the 14th, 2023. One of the problems of doing these videos is that you're all on different times. Sometimes you're in different days. And, this is really illustrated by the new moon coming up. So if you are in Europe or Asia or Australasia, then tomorrow, Friday, September the 15th, there is a new moon. But if you're in the Americas, that new moon is today. It's this evening on Thursday, September the 14th. So, it really does depend on your time zone, whether or not it's today or tomorrow. But I do want to talk about this new moon. I'm not saying it's a particularly spectacular new moon, but it does have some interesting features that I do want to discuss. And this new moon is also going to be relevant to Prince Harry because it's his birthday tomorrow. Now, I've already discussed Prince Harry in terms of his birthday, and I thought I was going to just keep quiet about him. Surely you're all completely bored of him by now, but I noticed a couple of things which I do want to share with you. And yes, I will be looking at Meghan's chart again. I mean, very briefly, I'll try not to spend too long on her horoscope, but something going on in her chart is kind of relevant to this new moon and to Harry's birthday, and that's something I do want to tell you about. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology for today. So here is the horoscope for today, which is Thursday, September the 14th. 2023, and this chart is set for New York at noon. Now, don't worry about that stuff going on in the top right. I mean, those are midpoints related to the new moon. I'll be going into all of that a bit later. So, as far as what's going on today is concerned, the moon is still in Virgo. There's the moon in Virgo. And as you can see, we're approaching a new moon. So the moon is going to be New York time. We'll be hitting that 9:40 p.m. today. Sun and moon together. Definition of a new moon. And the moon is making a trine aspect to Jupiter, and it's making a trine aspect to Uranus. So I think that's good. I mean, I think the moon trine Jupiter is particularly fortunate. The moon and Jupiter work very well together, particularly in trine. We can express ourselves very well. We can communicate with our feelings, but we're not going to go over the top. This is an earthy trine. We've got moon in Virgo, Jupiter in Taurus. Virgo and Taurus are both earth signs. So, we can be down to earth. We can get involved in sort of the material details. So if we want to make money, now might be a good time to start thinking about how we're going to do it. If we want to do something to do with maybe the soil. So if you have the opportunity to do sort of gardening, digging, planting, that kind of thing, I think you could gain enormous satisfaction from it, in that sort of spiritual, earthy kind of way. Digging potatoes. If you've got a chance to dig potatoes, I think you might really get into digging potatoes today. But But if you want to get involved in business, discuss ways for enriching yourself, again, that's going to be good. Moon in Virgo is very detailed. It doesn't miss anything out. And trining Jupiter in Taurus, understands the value of things. So it's a good opportunity to sort ourselves out financially. Then later in the day, well, depending on your time zone, where you are, the moon trines Uranus. So that could create a bit of excitement. Or, there might be a sudden inspiration about how we can, for example, make money. Or, how we can rearrange our environment, our physical environment where we live, into a way which is sort of more harmonious and more inspiring. And while this is going on, there's some interesting stuff going on with Venus and Jupiter. This may not be immediately obvious, but so let me show you what I mean. You see Venus and Jupiter you see that Venus and Jupiter are moving towards a square. Now that square I don't think that square happens today wherever you are. I think that's more of a tomorrow thing. But we can still start to feel its impact. Now Venus square Jupiter at its worst can be about overindulgence. It can be going over the top. Venus can often be about sort of eating, consumption, and we could overconsume. It's going to be worse tomorrow, but today, we can overconsume, eat too much, drink too much, spend too much. That tendency is certainly there. Jupiter in Taurus can appreciate, luxury. Indeed, so can Venus in Leo. Beware of buying luxury items. Beware of buying expensive food. I know you might be tempted. It might make you feel good, but just let it pass. Let it, stick to your budget. Don't overspend. And this desire to go over the top will eventually die away. And don't buy something just because it looks beautiful, just because it it feels good. No. You've got to be sensible, and you've got to be responsible. Now that is the downside of this Venus Jupiter square, but there is an upside. So if you look at this Venus Jupiter square, you will see that its midpoint is about 0 degrees Cancer. So you've got Cancer on the Venus Jupiter midpoint. Now Cancer is a cardinal point. It's square the Aries point. So we can say that the Aries point is aspecting Venus and Jupiter. And this puts the Venus-Jupiter aspect in a very different light, in a much more positive light. Venus-Jupiter is lucky. I mean, Jupiter is the greater benefic, Venus is the lesser benefic. They're on the Aries point. There is some luck in the air, and so we should be looking for opportunities. The Aries point represents the world at large, and there are generous people out there. There are situations where we can be at the receiving end of someone's generosity, or perhaps an organization's generosity, and in terms of relationships, provided we don't go over the top, Venus Jupiter can be about the healthy expression of one's feelings. So, love and harmony, getting closer to people. That's how we might be able to experience the Aries point on the Venus on the Venus Jupiter midpoint. This Venus Jupiter, bit of a two-edged sword, but if we handle it correctly, it can help us enjoy the work, enjoy the day, and it can be quite a successful time, and relationships can be strengthened. And I suppose in certain situations we might find a new relationship. So, from a romantic perspective, I would have said Aries on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint is good news. One slight downer on the day, though, I sort of need to point out, sort of for the sake of completeness, is that the Sun is square the Mars-Saturn midpoint. I will be talking about this a bit later when I discuss the full moon. But say, when the Sun is square the Mars-Saturn midpoint, the Mars-Saturn can be, as I've discussed, it can be about delay, it can be about negativity. In extreme situations, it can be about death and destruction. So there might be a certain fear about, what is going to happen, a certain negativity. Don't get caught in that negativity. Basically, you have to be aware. Not everything is fine. Something is not quite right. But all what's happening with the Sun square Mars Saturn is you need to just understand that it's just important to be realistic. So if you're feeling negativity about something, then maybe that's okay. But just don't let that negativity get out of control. So those are the positions of the planets for today. We do have a new moon, remember. It's if you're in the Americas, then this evening there could be a change. It might feel that something new is starting. New moons are about new beginnings. Now, these new beginnings often take place in secret. You don't need to shout about new beginnings. Indeed, if you shout about new beginnings, those new beginnings can really never happen. They might get strangled at birth. I suppose the reason being is that, the new moon is like a seed. It's a seed that needs to be deep within the earth in order to germinate. If you keep pulling that seed out, if you keep showing it to people, it's never going to get anywhere. So to begin with, it's best to keep your ideas secret. Unless there is someone you really trust, you need to talk about them. That's fine, but you need to tell people about your ideas on a need to know basis. So if you're in Europe, Asia, Australasia, then it's not this evening that you experience a new moon. It's going to be later. It's going to be tomorrow. So what I'm going to do now is look at my forecasts for today, my sun sign forecasts. So here we go. These are my forecasts for today, which is Thursday, September the 14th, 2023. Aries. There have been a lot of preparations to get through, and at times you might have felt that you were making zero progress. However, things are starting to change. You can see that you have made progress, even if it's slow, and you're getting ready for some kind of transition. But timing is important. Taurus. From one form of creativity to another. You've gone as far as you can with one idea, and it's now time to switch gears. Once you master the first steps, everything else will follow smoothly. In a more general sense, resist the temptation to exaggerate. Focus on what you can see in front of you, rather than on fantasy and guesswork. Gemini. Mercury is now coming to a standstill, and you may feel that it's time to put delayed plans back on the agenda. But really, it's a time for silence. In the stillness of the night, you can reflect on both success and failure, and when your Gemini brain finally starts slowing down, you'll be in a position to make coherent decisions. Cancer. You want to tell everyone how you feel and also discuss some of your ideas. While impulsive behavior might seem easy, you have to ask yourself whether it's appropriate. For a start, you don't have all the facts. And also, your usually fine-tuned emotional scanners might be temporarily malfunctioning. Leo. It might be time to put a thick line under some of your recent strategies. Some worked, some didn't, and now you can start tying up loose ends. And when you take a long, hard look at what you have done in the past, you'll realize where you went wrong, which puts you in a good position as far as your plans for the future are concerned. Virgo. The moon, while moving through your star sign, is making a useful aspect to Jupiter. You'll have more than your fair share of good luck, and the things you organize should work out very well. And something that used to be a problem is starting to ease up, and I don't think it'll be long before you find a solution. Libra. You don't always have to be at the center of things, and today you can enjoy your own company. But even if other people can't be avoided, you don't have to engage. Instead, you can watch from a distance and draw your own conclusions. And if you address yourself to complex financial details, the underlying solution will soon become clear. Scorpio. You can make things happen, and you can decide what kind of profile you have. If you want to be in the public eye, that's fine, but you can also operate behind the scenes. And how do you make things happen? Through the sheer power of your personality, which steamrollers forward, perhaps quietly, perhaps with all horns screaming. Sagittarius. At the moment, you're very down to earth. The excessive behavior normally associated with your star sign just isn't there, and you can address yourself to practical things like money and career. And your command of the details will be excellent, and if something isn't right, you'll be the first to notice. Capricorn. It's the higher path that matters, the one that doesn't just go from A to B, but which honours and respects the natural flow. There are no shortcuts, and also what matters is a fundamental morality which reflects your basic view of the life, which reflects your basic view of the world. And as you progress through the day, your credibility moves from strength to strength. Aquarius. You're not absolutely sure what's going on, and that's fine. You don't have to make any decisions, and instead you can observe the events as they unfold. Only later, when you have developed a clear perspective, will you be able to formulate an appropriate response. Let others make the first move. Pisces. People drift through your life, some getting closer, others drifting off into the horizon. It is a way of things, but you nonetheless need to consider how much you control this drifting. And there may be certain people who you need to reach out to before they disappear forever. A moment of hesitation can be costly. So what I'm going to do now is switch to the I Ching. And so, as always, I ask the question, what is Thursday going to be like for visitors to my YouTube channel? And I got a single hexagram, which is hexagram number 54, which is the marrying maiden. Now, one has to kind of see this hexagram in terms of the sort of Confucian approach that the I Ching takes. The symbolism here is of a young woman who wants to get married, and she's the one that initiates the marriage request. She sort of barges into someone's life and, maybe makes a proposal. And from a Confucian perspective, this is no good. This is not the way it works. This is not how marriages happen. It's not for the maiden to make the request. It's for the man. The top three lines represent the first son, I believe. The bottom three lines represent the third daughter. So this is the third daughter just barging in, and the first son is kind of a bit overwhelmed by the whole thing. And so we kind of have to translate that into sort of everyday reality, because we're not in Confucian China, and this isn't necessarily just about relationships, romance, marriage proposals. It's not the whole story. I suppose it might be. If you happen to get a sudden marriage request today, then you need to question it. But that's probably not what's going to happen. It's anyone being pushy, anyone forgetting their station. For example, it might be someone trying to sell you something. It might be someone on the phone just calling you up, wanting to sell you, I don't know, life insurance, whatever people like to sell you on the phone. And anyone behaving inappropriately. You don't have to have a Confucian view of the world to see inappropriate behavior. Someone who you don't know very well taking liberties, suddenly deciding that you've got a closer relationship than you actually have. So you've got to watch people's behavior, because there is going to be some inappropriate behavior somewhere along the line which relates to someone overstepping the mark and just forgetting who they are, and forgetting what their relationship with you actually is. I suppose it could work both ways. I suppose you might be the marrying maiden, perhaps being tempted to make inappropriate approaches, but maybe that is the right thing to do. I don't know. You really will have to consider the situation. So that's the I Ching. So a bit of caution is required. So I'm now going to switch back to the astrology, and I'm going to look at the new moon. Now, I do understand that a lot of astrologers like to look at new moons. You can see very long YouTube videos about every new moon. This new moon, I don't know. I don't feel that it merits a long YouTube video. I think one can just get out the main features pretty quickly. So the new moon you're seeing there, which is set for London. So that's new moon, set for September the 15th at 2:40 a.m. in Westminster, England. Um, the location of a new moon can make a difference. So set for London, you can see that Venus is rising and Chiron is in the midheaven, on the midheaven. If you're into Chiron, I'm not actually particularly into Chiron, but recently I have been putting it in charts, so you can see it's on the midheaven. That may say something about the experience of being in England, sort of that part of Europe. A sort of Venus rising, that's quite good for sort of for relationships, if you happen to be there. But Chiron on the midheaven, perhaps many people in England may just have some concerns about sort of work and career, and this may link with a recession. Chiron is the great wound. So perhaps that's what's going on in England at the moment. The country is finding it difficult to move forward, and there is, as I said, this great wound. But I didn't really want to talk specifically about England. I just wanted to just look at the new moon sort of overall. And so there's a new moon at 21:59 Virgo, and it's trine Uranus. So that seems to be good, doesn't it? It suggests there is a certain amount of excitement. This is a new moon where we can perhaps have really good ideas for starting a business or for making money, because that this trine is in earth signs. Even Jupiter and Taurus is quite close to the trine with the new moon. So it's almost like you've got Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, wide conjunction, trine with new moon. Jupiter-Uranus is about sudden ideas, a sudden sense that we've suddenly got it all together. There's been a lot of tension. Suddenly Jupiter-Uranus, yeah, it's there. We know what we need to do. Ebertin calls the Jupiter-Uranus contacts as, or is it the conjunction? Not sure. Ebertin, I think he refers to the pairing as this sort of the thank the Lord aspect. And so you put that in with the new moon, and the new moon, it is a new beginning, and this new beginning can be about putting these ideas into practice slowly. And as I've already said, you've got to be discreet. You don't want to tell everyone what you're doing at once, unless it's really necessary. So on the surface, it's looking good, but there is a problem with this new moon, and the problem is really what I'm putting up on the right. This is the midpoint tree for this new moon, and so you can see, if you look at the midpoint tree. Let me just show you. Let me just show you the midpoints for those are the midpoints. I read this from a sort of a midpoint sort in the program. So there you are. So this is what I'm seeing. It's pretty much the same as what you've got there. This new moon is on the it's on the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint. And we can go through this as a kind of a sequence. So you could say, well, you move from Jupiter, Pluto, Mars, Saturn. You forget the ascendant. That's Uranus, Zeus, and you might finish up with, say, Saturn, Hades. So Jupiter, Pluto is the principle of putting a great effort into self-improvement. So I think for many of us with this new moon, we're not going to be relaxed. We're going to feel that we have to make things better. Things just aren't good enough in our lives, and they can never be good enough. And we've got to do all we can to make things better, to improve ourselves. And I think that is that's very fortunate. That's a good way to approach the new moon. But then the next midpoint we see is new moon on the Mars-Saturn. And, we try our hardest to make things better. But then comes Mars-Saturn. We hit a real block. Incredible frustration. How difficult it is to get things done. Self-improvement is not easy. And this new moon on Mars-Saturn, on the Mars-Saturn, aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint, in terms of the world at large, in terms of politics, what's happening out there, can be about death and destruction. I don't think that death and destruction is really sort of personal. I mean, it's more about what you're seeing in the world. So that's another aspect of Mars-Saturn. So we get this feeling of frustration. Then we move to the Uranus-Zeus midpoint. Uranus-Zeus is quite militaristic. Witter, the sort of pioneer of this technique, this hypothetical planet Zeus is literally about armaments. Uranus-Zeus trying to change things through sort of new weapons, perhaps. Don't the Germans call them Wunderwaffe or whatever? Things that can change things. Maybe this new moon on the Uranus-Zeus midpoint is saying something about what's going on in Ukraine. I've just read that the Americans now said we're going to send some new weapon to the Ukraine. These ATACMS missile, I don't quite know what they do, but apparently they're really destructive, and they're another thing that could make things that could help Ukraine turn the tide. So so that might be what the new moon on Uranus on the Uranus-Zeus midpoint is about. You hit the obstacles. You could actually see this in terms of Ukraine. There's Mars-Saturn, real obstacles hitting Russian lines, taking massive casualties, and then trying to do something about it with the Uranus-Zeus midpoint. And then finally, the last midpoint, right at the end, is the Saturn-Hades midpoint. And so the new moon on the Saturn-Hades midpoint is really, Saturn is a planet of restriction. Hades is a planet of sort of death and garbage, and it's the final feeling that really things are just not working. It's just all completely stuck in the mud. And I suppose in a sort of global perspective, news perspective, it's kind of like Mars-Saturn, except it's more of the same. It's sort of death, destruction, things just not moving. And so overall, with this midpoint structure, I think this causes a lot of damage to the new moon. I mean, in a sort of a personal sense, clearly it's not. Well, I'm not talking about real death and destruction, but because of this midpoint structure, I actually think that overall this new moon is not a positive. I think it's actually quite a bad new moon. I think it's going to encourage us to try and improve our positions, our situation, but I don't think most of us are not going to be successful. We could end up just banging our heads against a brick wall. So yeah, I don't think nothing positive. Well, I don't say nothing positive about this new moon, because I've said that it's a great time for being inspired, for getting ideas, because the new moon is trine Uranus, trine Jupiter. Business ideas. We can ruminate on these ideas. We can work out how best to put them into action. But if we're in a position where we really want to change things and we actually try to put into action plans to change, we're going to be really obsessed with getting fast results, or at least there's a danger that we're going to be obsessed with getting fast results because this new moon is on the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint. And so if we start running down this midpoint tree, in the end, we're going to hit obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. Yeah, we might try to get results by using some weird some weird technique, trying to bring in technology, but in the end, it's likely to all end in failure. So be careful with that new moon. Don't be impatient. I mean, I think the new moon is going to be fine if you're not impatient. If you're not absolutely obsessed with getting fast results, just get the ideas and then work over them in a couple of weeks, over the next few weeks, but just don't push it. So that's my view on the new moon. So I now want to talk about Harry. Now it is his birthday tomorrow, which is Friday, September the 15th, and here is Prince Harry's chart, and you can see he's born on September the 15th, 1984. So Harry has a solar return. So this solar return is, the sun returns to where it was every year, returns to a place it was at birth. So we got Harry's solar return. So if Harry wants to know about his year ahead, he needs to look at his solar return. And so I've sort of shown you Harry's solar return. So Harry's solar return is there. That's Harry's solar return. You will see that Harry's solar return, London time, is September the 16th. So that's on Saturday. So this is just after the new moon. So there is Harry's, the moon has moved on. But there's the sun. Okay, what do we know about the sun? Well, if we look at the sun in Harry's chart, we get back to kind of this same midpoint structure that I was talking about. So let's just go look at Harry's the midpoints for the solar return. Let's make that a bit bigger. And look at what, the sun. It's a solar return, so we should be looking at the sun. And, we see in Harry's chart, he's got sun on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, squaring the Mars-Saturn midpoint. He's got the sun on the Saturn, on the Saturn Hades midpoint, and on the Uranus-Zeus midpoint. So that suggests to me that the year ahead is going to be quite frustrating for him. It's going to be difficult for him to make progress. Sun squaring the Mars, the Mars-Saturn midpoint, and Sun aspecting the Saturn Hades midpoint. I mean, that could be real despair. I would have thought. So that solar midpoint tree is difficult. I mean, there is also Sun on the Mars Admetos midpoint, but that's more of the same. Admetos is another a hypothetical planet associated with death. It can be like delayed death. It's like keeping something alive for a little bit longer. So that really doesn't help. So I think there are problems with this solar return for Harry, and as I've already suggested, I think that at the beginning of next year, things could be very difficult for him. So I don't see this solar return necessarily as a positive for him. Now, one thing about Megan's chart, I did warn you that I was going to be looking briefly at Megan's chart. So just remember that Prince Harry has his sun at 2257 Virgo. Now, there is Megan's chart. Now, I wanted to progress Megan's chart. In other words, every day of, if we want to know what's every day we move the planets. On. So if we want to know what's going on in Megan's when Megan is 42, she was 42 last month. We look at what was going on during the 42nd day after she was born. And that's secondary progressions. So here is, so let's, this is, well, these are solar arc directions, but it's only the sun I want to look at. So her solar arc directed progressed sun, secondary progressed sun, where we use the solar arc method, is at 22 degrees 39 Virgo. So on sort of September the 15th, which is around 42 days after she was born, September the 15th, 1981. She was born on August the 4th, 1981. So we look at what's going on September the 15th, 1981, and we see that the sun is at 2239 Virgo. So in other words, her sun has moved to the place of Harry's sun. And I've noticed this before, I've talked about it before, and I just find that just really strange. I mean, what does it mean? Now, we know that right now that the transiting Mars-Saturn midpoint is on Harry's sun. So likewise, the transiting Mars-Saturn midpoint is on Megan's sun. In Harry's solar return, we have got sun locked on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And so Megan, for the next year, is going to be dealing with a man who's got a solar return, who's got sun on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, which is hitting her sun. So I think this could be a further problem with the relationship. But there is a silver lining. There's something strange. Now, as far as solar returns are concerned, there's a controversy about how you calculate solar returns. So there is Harry's solar return. Now, there are some people, like me, I'm quite traditional. As far as I'm concerned, you should calculate the solar return for the place you were born, because I take the view you can't really escape your fate. If you were, Harry was born in Paddington, I think, in London, and so that's where you set his solar return for. But there's an alternative approach. You should say, well, no, you set the solar return for where you are. And so you can get a situation where people will travel to find, to travel to the place which makes the best solar return. When I was first, doing astrology classes with the Faculty of Astrological Studies, I think the woman teaching this, she was sort of mentioning that some people really did travel to where they would find out where the best place to be for their solar return was, and they would just go there. So there is that view, and there are certain cases where traveling to the right place is the place, it can be done. Or rather, it might be a good thing to do. So what about Harry? Where is he going to be during his solar return? Where is he going to be at September the 16th, 2023, sort of in the middle of the night somewhere. Well, actually, I think we know where he's going to be, because Harry has gone to the Invictus Games, his big thing for sort of, isn't it, for veterans who've been wounded and disabled and so forth. This is Harry's big thing, and the Invictus Games is in Dusseldorf, and I think we've known that Harry is going to spend the whole time, the duration of the Invictus Games, he's going to be in Dusseldorf, which is in Germany, and so what we might want to do is we might want to relocate his solar return for Dusseldorf. Now, it's not going to make a big difference to the solar return chart, because, London to, if you move a chart from London to Dusseldorf, Dusseldorf is sort of the western side of Germany. It's like towards Belgium. If you do that, it's not going to make a big difference to the chart, but it's going to make a difference. So when you look at Harry's chart set for where he was born, you can see that Venus is at 1448 Leo, and the ascendant is at 930 Leo. But if you relocate his chart for Dusseldorf, you get this. You can see the change. Venus has gone onto the ascendant. So that Venus rising has become much more powerful by Harry going to Dusseldorf. And this north node on the midheaven, I mean, if you compare the two, you see he's got his north node at 25 Aries, midheaven at 19 Aries. It's a bit off for midheaven. Venus is a bit off, but then when you move it to Dusseldorf, right on. So the move to Dusseldorf really does strengthen that Venus on the ascendant. So how might one read that? What might it do? Now, from my perspective, you can't avoid your fate by moving to a different place. But one of the good things about this solar return, he's got Venus rising. So if, for example, he was concerned about his relationship with Meghan and wanted to do what he could to keep the relationship going, I mean, who knows how it's working out. Having that solar return with Venus exactly rising in Dusseldorf like that, I would have thought would improve things. Harry might also be concerned about, his career, his work. North Node is, by and large, a benefic. South Node is a malefic, and having a North Node right on the midheaven might make him more focused on his career. So I do think that Harry, by having his solar return in Dusseldorf, that was a good move. I don't think that the planning of the Invictus Games was conducted by an astrologer. I believe they were supposed to happen last year, but they had to be delayed because of COVID. This was planned some time ago. I don't think an astrologer was involved with it, but who knows? Yes, I think that's kind of really interesting, and I think that Harry spending all his time at the Invictus Games, not rushing back to California. I mean, at least what I read. I just read one thing saying he was going to spend the whole time in Dusseldorf. So provided he doesn't go rushing back to California, was a really smart move. He had I think he has a difficult solar return because of the Sun being on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, but by pushing Venus right on the ascendant, by making us move to Dusseldorf, I think he may have gone some way towards mitigating a problem, and I think he's gone some way towards helping improve his relationship with Meghan. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say on the subject of Harry. I thought that was just quite interesting, that Dusseldorf solar return. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I will talk to you tomorrow.